Hello there, welcome to Infinity. I'm Charlie Seraphin. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about the work of Edgar Cayce, who was reputed to be one of the greatest clairvoyants who ever lived. Our guest is Chet Snow, an historian at Travis Air Force Base. Chet is a student of Edgar Cayce's life and work, and the first and most obvious question is, who is this guy, Edgar Cayce?
Well, it's very interesting. Edgar Cayce has been called the Miracle Man. He's been called America's most famous psychic. Basically, I think he defined himself as simply an instrument, as a channel through which the universal force, that is, the overriding force in the universe, often known as God, but you can call it by many different terms, could come through him and speak and be translated through his unconscious mind into language that could be understood by people living in physical bodies.
Can you place him in space and time?
Okay, Edgar Cayce was an American, quintessentially American, born in Hopkinsville, Kentucky in March of 1877, and he lived in the South most of his life, in Alabama, in Ohio, and finally settling in Virginia Beach, Virginia in 1925. It's interesting that the reason that he settled in Virginia Beach consciously, you might say, was that one of the readings which he had, and just to digress for a second here, he never called these readings, he called them the information. The information that he got, which has since been sort of stenographically recorded and are called readings today, gave him information that Virginia Beach would be a good place for his work. So he settled in Virginia Beach and lived there until January of 1945, and he died there during World War II of a heart attack.
Okay. We have talked about psychics quite often here on Infinity and about different people's psychic abilities. How was Edgar Cayce different? How is he different than what the average person listening might consider to be a psychic?
Well, I think there are a couple of things where he might be considered to be somewhat different. First of all, the time period in which he lived and the place in which he lived was extremely non-conducive to any kind of belief in or use of psychic abilities. The American South in the 20s and 30s, or actually even before that, you have to remember he was born in 1877, was very prejudicial against this kind of information. And he himself grew up in an extremely fundamentalist Protestant tradition, which shocked himself. He had a hard time dealing with this. So in that case, in that sense, he was different from many psychics who more or less self-develop. This came from outside, and yet at the same time it was within him, and that he couldn't live without, I think, is the best way to put it. The second thing that, in perhaps more importantly, that makes Cayce different is the results of his work. His work was concentrated in medical diagnosis and cure. And in many circles he's known as the father of holistic medicine, of modern nutrition, of dealing with osteopathic and chiropractic results for people who had no idea at that time that this might be a possible way of dealing with individuals who had very serious medical problems. So in a way, his work was different than many psychics who give personal or psychological readings, in that there's a bound record of results, physical results of his work. Over 9,000 records exist of cases with 2,500 or more people whom he and medical doctors together treated, and I believe the success rate was astounding. At least the rate of successive diagnosis.
How did he work? Could you give us an example of what it would be if I had some physical problem and I had heard about Mr. Cayce and I wanted some help? What would I do?
He developed the work over his lifetime, obviously, but the main way that people contacted him was through the mail. He would then line up a date and time with them, ask them to be in a specific place, which they would tell him in a letter, and then he would go into a hypnotic, self-induced hypnotic trance in his own house in Virginia Beach, only accompanied by his wife, a stenographer who worked with him for many years, and sometimes interested observers. And it was from then this hypnotic trance state that he was able to contact what he called the body or the entity of the individual many thousands of miles away oftentimes. And in this state he could contact their record, their being, I guess you might put it, and make the diagnosis, and oftentimes including humorous little side remarks, by the way, such as, "Oh, that's a pretty pink bathrobe you have on today," or didn't shave this morning, did you?" And come up with incredible, not only psychological portraits, but also really very real physical ones of what their ailments were, what their problems were, and then go on, which is, I think, extremely important to note, go on to give holistic medical cure. He based most of his cure work in the area of nutrition, of proper herbal and natural type of remedies, although he occasionally did say, "Hey, we're going to have some surgery or something along this line." The other thing that he often recommended for people was exercise and chiropractic or this kind of treatment and to deal with their spine. The spine apparently is very important and not very well understood, so that he practically developed and certainly enriched all kinds of modern medicine.
What about some of the other areas, that psychic prediction gets into? Earthquakes, political events, and a lot of other things that people look into the future sort of and predict. Did Edgar Cayce do some of that?
Yes, he did, although he considered this to be very much a sideline of his real work, which was serving other people through helping diagnose medical problems and helping them to lead a more efficient life. He did, however, through several of the readings, tangentially get involved in these questions, and then as other people brought them up, he got more involved and began to ask the source of his information, which he considered, as I say, to have been coming from a universal consciousness, a universal force. It was not his own conscious or subconscious mind. It transcended that. He called it the Akashic Records, which is well known in psychic circles, basically a Sanskrit word having to do with the living record that all life forms record somehow into the universe. He could tap into this. So it was about 10-15 years after he began giving readings that one day a man came to him and asked him about a medical problem, and in dealing with the medical problem he just casually gave the remark that part of this problem had to do with a previous life on earth that this individual had had, and that was at the root of the trouble. This shocked the heck out of him. He was incredulous when he woke up. You have to understand that he did all this in trance, and it was stenographically recorded before tape recorders, so he never even heard his own voice saying these things. But when he woke up and the stenographer read it back to him, he was a good Southern Christian individual and had no idea, no concept of this could be true. But he did have trust and faith in the information that he was getting, and so he then began to study and follow up on this after this incident occurred. And that led him into many more esoteric subjects, which he called life readings. He did life readings for people, not just physical readings after that. And there are about 2,500 of these life readings that are available for study in Virginia Beach. So he got a very different picture of the universe than we get out of our ordinary one life consciousness. He got a picture of a universe that covers eons of time, of a humanity that has a very special place in this universe as a directly created body from this universal force or God. In fact, he considered humanity in its broadest sense to be co-creators with God of much of the universe. In a sense, you could say that we start with one force, a force which wants relationship. A relationship is defined by adding to it. from itself it creates a group, a entity, a series of entities with which it can have relationships. These are humans in the fullest sense of the term. Humans, through various reasons of their own, descended, you might say, from a state of pure spirit, of pure light, into material or physical form, unfortunately rebelled against the relationship that was being set up with the creative force, and began to be interested in their own creations here in the earth and in material things. This led to a separation from God, or a separation from wholeness, from unity, and of course then led to what we consider to be the cycle of life and death, birth to death, coming in and out of physical body, so that his whole view of the universe evolved as he received more information based on people's stories, people who came to him that asked him about their whole life, not just their life in this particular time, in this particular body. And he would then pick this up, and today there are social scientists, psychologists at Virginia Beach in the association which was founded by Cayce and by his friends, which is called the Association for Research and Enlightenment, or ARE. They're studying the records, the stenographic records that were left behind, and producing books and documents, putting them together, integrating them, and coming up with much more unified theories than Cayce himself actually had. What he did was to provide the raw material, you might say.
Did he ever have, you mentioned it was a difficult struggle for him, he had a fundamentalist background. Did he have trouble figuring out just where he fit into the whole picture, into this whole cosmic picture? Why me, Lord, sorts of questions?
He had a lot of that, as particularly at the beginning, although he had underneath a very strong sense that, in fact, this was truth, and that he did have some special role to be playing. Of course, he also was able to do readings on himself. He would be induced into the trance, he would self-induce into the trance, and then questions would be posed to him by those who were working with him, either his stenographer or his wife primarily. And he came up with some very interesting dimensions to that. He found that he had had a number of previous lives, that these lives had ranged from what we might think in traditional standards, from the very good really to the quite bad, that he had been involved in many previous episodes in the Earth's history of using psychical powers, and that in fact it was this development of using of these powers in previous lives that gave him the ability to be such a clear method of transmission today. But I want to stress one thing that he did say also, was that there is nothing that I do that you cannot do, and by that he meant everyone, if you're willing to pay the price. I think that's where the kicker comes down, if you're willing to pay the price. He paid a rather heavy price physically. He really wasted away giving readings for people when he was ill, particularly with the pressures of the war, when World War II broke out, which he had predicted, by the way, and which had happened regardless of his prediction and regardless of his urgings of many people to do things to try to prevent it. When the war broke out, he overtaxed his physical resources, and the price, in a sense, is that if you're going to be this kind of channel, you have to give up yourself. He put it once, can you honestly think that you would be willing to give your consciousness up for several hours a day, every day, to disappear personally, to be so selfless, to give yourself for other people's needs? And he only gave readings if people required them or requested them. He never gave a reading unless the individual involved, or in some cases their parents, if they were too small to be able to do it themselves, requested such things. You must be willing to give up self and be entirely devoted in what you're doing to the service of other people. So that these are not things, the people may do this, it's very possible, but the kind of selflessness that's involved and the total lack of monetary gain goes against, I think, most people's grain today, and inhibits our native psychic ability to a great extent.
What is the lasting significance of Cayce's work? Is there application from the specific readings that he did for individuals? You have mentioned the term several times early on, holistic medicine, chiropractic medicine. Are there texts that are growing out of his readings that have application for other people who have backaches or neck aches or ear aches or headaches or whatever?
Yes, very much. This was one of the primary reasons that he set up the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach. He also became associated with some very famous physical therapists and nutritionists, among leadership of which was Dr. Harold J. Riley, who has an Edgar Cayce handbook for health through drugless therapy. Also, he stimulated this entire field of physical therapy, of looking into the relationships between diet and exercise and stress relaxation. He called it CARE, C-A-R-E, and that stood for circulation, assimilation, relaxation, and elimination. It was his definite feeling that if one could take care of these four functions of the body, for the most part, would take care of itself in everything else.
Let's move beyond the health discussion into a couple of other things. What did Cayce's readings have to say about Atlantis?
This again came up in the same context as I was mentioning about reincarnation as an adjunct to a physical reading. He simply came up with somebody who had lived in Atlantis, and this began then, sparked interest among others who began asking if they had lived in Atlantis or if this was an important period. And yes, in fact, he developed and showed that Atlantis had existed, that it was at in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean primarily, ended up splitting apart due to earthquakes and volcanoes, all of this taking place in a very early period of the world, over 50,000 years ago, that there are still remnants of that culture that are covered by ocean, silt, and sand and debris. Among other things, he made the prediction that some of the remnants of this civilization would come to light after the period of 1958. The period of 1958 to 1998, by the way, he considered to be a crucial turning point in world history. He quite accurately predicted many earthquakes, increased volcanic activity, a rising of Atlantis is how he put it. We have seen a very little bit of this to date. He pinpointed one of the places that Atlantis culture would become renowned in America today, near the island of Bimini in the Bahamas. And I don't know how many of the listeners have seen the Jacques Cousteau and other shows that they have recently discovered on the seafloor some very old stones making a walkway, and this was the kind of thing that he had predicted back in the 30s, long before any of this ever was in the public eye. He also predicted that, I hate to say it, that there will be a disastrous earthquake in California between 1958 and 1998. But I don't want to end up or have it thought that his was a philosophy of despair. His was one of hope. He continually said that these things can be changed by human endeavor. If people can become attuned to this universal consciousness, if they are willing to lose themselves into helping others, to getting together in groups, to serving, to getting interested in nutrition and getting interested in their health and in their bodies, not just for their own selfish reasons. If you do it for yourself, you lose. It comes back very closely to what Jesus said, when you give up your life for my sake, you gain it. If you do it for yourself, you lose it. Cayce was always very in tune with those primary statements made by Jesus, whom he emphasized, by the way. He was very much in that tradition.
One of the difficult things with great people through the ages is that many times they are not accepted while they are alive, during their own time, in their own place. I would imagine that to a certain extent that was true of Cayce, that was a little bit beyond the witch-burning stages of this country, but I have to think that a lot of his neighbors were not accepting of him and thought he was somewhat of a kook or a quack.
Yes, that was very much the case, especially in the early years before he gathered around him people who did have a better understanding and with whom he could relate more easily when he went to Virginia Beach, for example. It was a problem for him throughout his life. One of the readings told him that he would never have very much material success in this life because in a previous life, when he had had material success, he had misused it in wine, women, and song, and that this time his upper self or his higher self wasn't going to let him make that mistake again. And so, in effect, although he always had enough money to take care of his family and to maintain their house and things like that, he never had a very great amount of money. He was misunderstood. I think that one of the most difficult things for him to accept was that in many cases, when people began to understand the incredible veracity and provableness of his work, they immediately tried to use him for their own private gain. He at one point thought he could prospect for oil in Texas because this would be a way of finding resources, wouldn't be hurting anybody, it would provide some money for his family. And within a series of a few months, he practically started a range war by prospectors and prospective prospectors out with guns trying to find him, to control him, to put him at gunpoint in a trance and tell them where the oil was. Mm-hmm. This was such a shock to him that he lost his ability for several years as a result. And it was only through helping a child who had polio that he was persuaded to go back into trance again. And so it didn't help him materially. I think that's very important to know. It was not something that was set up, and the Association for Research and Enlightenment was not something that was set up to help either Cayce financially or the people involved. It is a group set up to help preserve the readings to begin with, and then to begin to spread their message. Cayce said you have to start with individuals, but individuals can't work alone. Individuals have to work in small groups, and beyond small groups, then you have to deal with masses or movements, and finally you begin to get into a national or international scope.
Is there a difficulty in all of this growing out of the realm of what actually happened into the realm of mythology after his passing? Is there a danger that in interpretation of what Cayce actually did and actually said, that we're going to blow the thing out of proportion, get on the wrong track?
Yes, and he himself predicted that was one path that might happen with the association, that in fact if they did not follow the spirit of the readings and if they tried to stick to the letter of the law, as it were, they would end up not achieving the purpose that had been set down before them. On the other hand, we do have a very good body of work there, a printed work that is available that people can go back and check things against. So I think that we're much more fortunate than, for example, in the earlier times when there were people who had such information or similar information, but that there wasn't the availability of the actual written word to go back and check in nearly such a complete fashion. And hopefully that will keep us from this pitfall which you mentioned, which I think is a very real one.
Did Cayce ever address dreams, their significance for individuals?
Yes, he was very involved in dream research. He felt that dreams and meditation were probably the two best ways to find out what is really inside yourself and to find out where your reality lies. I would suggest to anyone that they get involved in their dreams and interpreting their dreams, and also in meditation.
Is there a meditation, we've done a number of programs on, is there a particular approach to dreams that Cayce recommended in terms of finding their true self?
Well, I think he said in terms of meditation that the primary thing is to make sure that the meditation attunes you to the highest possible force that is the unifying force of the universe. Don't meditate on a specific word or on a specific thought of trying to get in touch with another person, someone who has died or something like that. Meditate on God, meditate on universal force, and include prayer with your meditation, and always act to help other people out of what you get in your meditation or in your dreams. You can always find something in a dream or a series of dreams that will lead you into helping someone else. And the more you do that, the more you help other people with the information you get, the better you'll become as a channel.
With all of the reading and study that you've done and the obvious wealth of information that you've picked up from your work on Cayce's life and works and readings, have you had personal experiences with regard to psychic abilities, the healing messages, any of the things that Cayce did?
Yes, some. I've particularly been involved in dreams. I've done a lot of dream recording, and I've seen the dreams come true. I've seen dreams that warn me of things that might happen, and that in fact then as they occurred I was able to deal with them. Dream
recording, do you remember the dream after you wake up and write it down? Is that what you're talking about?
It's hard, but the best thing to do is as you dream, you tell yourself beforehand that you're going to dream a dream and wake up, and your body will wake you up, and at that point you either ought to tape record it or write it down right there in the middle of the night and then go back to sleep. It's difficult, but with a little bit of discipline it can be done, and it can be very rewarding if you do that.
It might be kind of a mundane question, but I'm wondering what kind of language you use in the study groups in prayer now. Do you use universal force? Do you use the term God? Do you use the term Christ ever, or does it depend on the...
All of them.
Mm-hmm.
Creative forces is the term that Cayce perhaps used the most. That includes us. We are co-creators with God of this material universe, and so we must be looking for that part of God that resides in us and bring that out to the world.
When you say those prayers, are those non-denominational Christian prayers?
They're really non-denominational. Cayce was very much a Christian all of his life, and through his work, the Christ was considered to be the highest form of consciousness, but he felt that all religions had truth to give, and that in fact the universal force has operated through many different people at many different times. It was his feeling that Jesus was special, but that beyond that being special and being the one who in fact incorporated a total balance of God and humanity, that many other teachers such as the Buddha, such as the Hindu teachers, have given good things, and that those religions also are pathways. The important thing is to come to an attunement with the universal force, and beyond that to get rid of yourself and to throw your life into helping others, service to other people.
As Edgar Cayce saw it, the future of the world is bright?
The future of humanity is bright because humanity has a very special place in the universe. It is our future to be reunited with the creative forces, with the unity of God, while maintaining our individuality. That doesn't necessarily mean that there is a bright material future. That's not important. In fact, in many cases and in many times, material, physical testing is very required. He predicted that the near-term future of the earth is not very bright, that we will be going through extreme changes, both in a natural geophysical sense and also with the possibility of human-caused destruction. But he said we can alter this. We can make this more positive. We cannot eliminate all change. We cannot eliminate all physical destruction. But we can attune ourselves to it in such a way that we will gain from it, as souls, as individual entities, and that in fact the world will be a better place afterward.
This is Infinity. Remember to keep your mind open and listen to your heart. I'm Charlie Seraphin. Thank you for listening.